Good morning. Sound good? Yeah. All right, awesome. Let's see if this is better. How you feeling? I don't want to fall off of this. Good morning. Hi, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Coach Kyle. I've been coaching here for 7 months or so, and people that will probably come up as I'm talking. My wife Patricia in the back. My oldest son Caden is our 16-year-old teenager, and then you'll probably hear Coda scream from the kids' room at some point midway through. I'm excited to get to talk to you guys today. Kelly mentioned some time back that he'd be interested in me sharing my God story. And then about 11 hours ago, I got a text saying, "Hey, you want to do that tomorrow?" So this is my first chance. One thing, Kelly, the first time we kind of met as a Move Daytona group, he described me to the group as like the weirdest introvert. Because, and I never asked him what he meant, but what I assume he meant is that, like, on the one hand, I can be very, like, shut in and quiet and not real talkative, but if you ask me about the wrong thing, and there's a few of them, fantasy football, UFC, Under Armour, you better get a chair and lunch and pack in for a while, because I can get going. So, and I like telling stories, so we're going to try to, I started the clock, so we can try to keep today under control, because it could be 4 minutes or 44 for the intro. So I'll do my best to kind of tell you about how I got to where I'm at today, and keep it clear for us. So it starts off, I'm from here, I'm from Daytona, born in Halifax, 1983, and my parents, had, my mom grew up, her father was a pastor, small churches up in Michigan, and so she very much grew up in the church life. And my dad grew up down in Miami, and Catholic school and everything like that, even though I think he skipped more than he went, but he went up to Michigan for to a Bible college, and that's where they met, and then came back to Florida, and then eventually ended up in Daytona. And so I was basically born into Whitechapel Church, Warner Christian Academy. I was there probably my first week, and then every week of my life until about 1998, when I was in junior high. And so growing up in the church, I was at the school, I was at the church every single day. So I knew every single Bible lesson and all that stuff. And at 8 years old, I wanted to be baptized because 8 was my favorite number. And so that was the perfect year to get baptized. And so that was kind of the mindset, is everything was just, well, yes, of course I'm a Christian, and of course, this and that. And I do know in junior high I started to get pretty serious about it. I started to do this devotional where I was writing in a journal, answering the questions daily and everything like that. And I was really starting to learn about faith and strength and those things, and I was starting to get a better understanding of, was that me? Is that something I'm doing? But then 1998, I'm getting ready to go to high school. And the truth is, my whole life was basketball. That is the only thing I cared about. Sunday mornings when we're sitting there in church, I was thinking about that crossover, that I was going to try to, I was trying to work out the next level of continuing to develop as a basketball player. And that was my mission. That was it. I wanted to play college basketball. I love baseball, love football, but along the way, those kind of fell off. And so as I got into high school, basketball took over. And so as I went to a public school and I was very sheltered, I didn't know what anything was, leaving a private school, going to a public school. I didn't know what beer looked like, smelled like. I didn't know anything about girls. And just, if it didn't bounce, I wasn't catching it and throwing it and anything like that. It was like, all right, well, I don't know what that is. So, so I get to public school, and fortunately, I got in with a group of athletes that, they were kind of focused on sports too. And so, so I go through my 4 years of high school just continuing to grow into sports and continuing to fade away from my faith. And you know, I always went to church and everything like that, but it was very slowly, steadily decreasing in its realness in my life. And so you know, things in high school work out pretty well. Did very well in school. Basketball took a while, but it finished up very well. So I did get the opportunity to go on and play in college. So the entire decision about going to college is around basketball. You know, as far as the academic side of it, literally all I would ever say was like, yeah, I just got to get that paper on my wall. I just got to get that paper. It doesn't matter what it is, writing, math. You know, I could probably get a degree in any of it. I'm not great, but I'm okay in everything. Whatever. I just want to play basketball. And it's a Christian-ish kind of school, but not really serious about it. So, you know, that doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Where am I going to play basketball? And so I get there and I play, and it doesn't go so well. It kind of turns into a disaster because you know, just wasn't the same situation as before. Things with coach, didn't have a good relationship. So all of a sudden, you know, I'm 2-3 years in, and I'm like just figuring out how to get my way to a diploma and get out of there. Don't even play basketball my senior year, which I thought was never ever possible. My roommate the year before. So going into his senior year, he decides not to play basketball. And I'm thinking, like, that's insane. Like, this is the best you're ever going to be. This is what you've worked for a couple decades, and now you're here and you just give it away. And a year later, I made the same exact choice, and it just wasn't it wasn't enjoyable, and it was just really making me more miserable and tight. And so finish up college, play basketball, or don't play basketball, get the degree in whatever, biology, which never once looked for a job in biology, and never even considered looking for a job in biology. In fact, the first thing I asked the players at the school when I visited as a high school senior was like, I don't know what liberal arts school means. Like, do I have to take classes like biology? And they were like, oh, no, you don't, which, actually you could take anatomy, which I did, which didn't count towards my biology degree, so I had to go back and take basic biology. But the point was, like, getting through college was just my focus, my goals on things that that had really taken over my life. So I get out, and of course I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Well, I still like basketball. How can I stay around that? I'm not going to referee because everybody hates those guys, and I can't. Like, if somebody breaks a finger and walks off the court, I'll pass out before they do, so I can't do that. So it's coaching. I'll get into coaching. So I started teaching and coaching in high school, and do that for a couple years. And high school wasn't what I think I belonged back in the 70s. Older style. I'm kind of an old school kind of mentality on certain things, and also I don't work well with computers. So I think if I was teaching in the 70s, it would have worked out fine, but nowadays it didn't. So I did, a couple years of high school, and then I went to college. It was a great experience, but kind of the whole time I'm again working towards my career path. And then after 4 years of basically kind of volunteering at Embry-Riddle, again, great experience, but I'm not getting paid for it. I go back to high school, and 1 year it all kind of turns to disaster. So now I'm 6-7 years out of college, and what the heck am I going to do now? During this time, while I was first few years out of college, I was dating a girl from school, and I didn't really like her, truthfully, but I'm nice, or at least I was at the time, and so I just couldn't look at her and be like, I know you moved down here from Georgia, but like, I would like you to go back home. Like, I don't think I like you that much. I don't think you like me that much. I think we're wasting our time. So from 21 till 28, I was just kind of pretending, hoping that it would end. And so, this is kind of one of the first times where I was like, holy crap, God exists. There was a girl from high school, and I absolutely loved her. I wish I could have packed her up in my bag and taken her to LaGrange with me for college. And the funny thing is, with my longtime girlfriend, one of our fights all the time was about if I ever ran into this girl, Patricia, if like I was allowed to talk to her and have lunch. And I'm like, look, if I run into her, we're going to get a sub, talk, like she's my friend. And we would get in this fight over this theoretical thing all the time. And it would always kind of just keep us in this, in this kind of position. And then I get this job. I leave Embry-Riddle. I get this full-time job, which now is going to pay me money, which I don't have an excuse not to buy a ring anymore, which had been my savior for 4 years. Like, look, I can't afford anything, so you just can't move on. So God stepped in, and He shut that thing down somehow. I still don't know how He did it. But about 12 hours after I was free, I get a text from my buddy who's been waiting to try to get Patricia back into my life and into the picture. And so that while this career thing is plane crashing, the other side of my life, which made me miserable all the time, all of a sudden completely changes. And Trish comes back in my life, and it doesn't take a whole lot, or it doesn't take a long time, for us to be together, for me to decide, like, this is definitely the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. So that's when things, I believe, in my spiritual life started to change, because when we decided to get married, Caden is 7 years old, and all of a sudden, now I'm responsible for somebody. It's not just me go to church, phase out, and then leave, and then spend the rest of my week, doing whatever I want. Like, now all of a sudden, like, I've got to guide somebody. So it became, something that I was like, okay, now it's time to grow up. And if you're really a Christian, it's time to be a Christian, because you've been calling yourself a Christian. And if you're an alien looking down, I always like to, think like, man, what do aliens think if they look down and see people running around the bases? Like, what are they doing? And, some of the different sports activities, and just some of the different things. And if, aliens are looking down at my life and saying, okay, that's what Christian, that dude, he ain't it. I mean, he says Christian. I don't see the evidence. And that was, there was no argument with that. So now all of a sudden it's time to start, get serious and real about it. And then we get married, and about 5 minutes later, Coda comes along. And so now it's, it's very, very real, very quick. And so we started going back to church with the boys, and for the first time in my life, I enjoyed going to church. And so we were going back, and we tried a couple different places. Whitechapel had some issues, and so we were there a little bit. We bounced around a few other places, and then eventually they got a few things straightened out. So we went back there and started bringing the boys in there. And I get this job, which allowed me to get the ring for her. And it was okay at first. It got me, it got me paid for a little bit, but it was a low-level job, not something I was excited about. And it took a lot of hard work, and it took a lot of grinding. And after 2 or 3 years, I started to work my way up. But going from the first couple of years of cleaning tables and chairs for 8 hours, 10 hours a day, banquet tables, things, people rent and get barbecue sauce all over. And I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, I know I wasn't great in college, but I mean, I paid for, years on tuition loans, and this is what I'm doing with it. And so, it was just, like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And so, first couple years are like that, and then I worked my way up to start, advancing. And so things get a little bit better, but as I got paid a little bit more, there was opportunities for overtime. So I started grinding for overtime and trying to increase that end of year amount of money. And over the next few years, I got not nice and miserable, and just my thing was, yes, I'm making money for my family, and it had nothing to do with making money for the family. I was pissed because, my two not as smart and not as hardworking friends from high school, one who basically was gifted his diploma, they're both making 2-3 times more money, sweating not at all, and I'm killing myself in this embarrassing type of job. And it was just this like sense of like, what is wrong with me? I did things the right way, and so I'm bitter and I'm miserable and I'm frustrated. And I'm going to church on Sundays, and I'm getting a lot out of it, but then it's not affecting my week at all. Like, I'm pissed. Guy walks into my truck to help me load my truck, and I don't know him, and I cussed him so far out of my truck. It was unbelievable. It's 8:02 in the morning, and he offers to help, and I chase him away from my truck with, so many nasty words, and it's just, that's the way I was. If it wasn't, if it wasn't in my favor, if I'm driving up to a light and it doesn't click green, like, I'm pissed. And it was just like that all the time. So we're sitting at the dinner table at night, and I'm just like, man, I gotta be miserable to be around. And so for years, this is what it was like. And so 2019, finally I've been there for 5 years, and we get into a house, and finally, at Whitechapel, somebody had an opportunity for a job. And I don't care, you could have been offering me to sell, mouse traps. Like, it didn't matter. I was dying to get out of there. And so there's an opportunity. It's like, okay, hey, this is real. I'm taking it, and I'm out. And I do the job for about 3 hours and realize this is not the direction that I'm trying to go with my lifestyle. And so the first Friday, it was a guy that I knew I grew up with. He gave me my second set of stitches by bumping me into a staircase when we were playing. So I'd known him for a long time, and I said, hey, I appreciate the opportunity, but this just isn't going to work. This isn't what I want to do. So I talked to Trish, and she's like, okay, but like, so how are we going to pay the bills? I don't know, but we'll figure it out. So I get out of that, and I go for 3 months, unemployed. And during that time, I met with a pastor at the church, and he's like, and I met with him. I'm talking about, some of my vision. I'm a great idea guy, thinking and coming up with stuff. We were just talking about that. I think of stuff. I don't do any of it. And that's one of my problems. I got tons of great ideas for stuff that have just, withered away because I think, I come up, I plan the whole thing out, and then nothing gets done. And so I go and I talk to the pastor, and he's like, hey, you remember that guy with the foam finger that came a few months ago? He's like, he's coming down from Georgia. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that guy was kind of crazy, but like, okay. He's like, well, yeah, here's what he did, CrossFit and all this stuff. He's like, you got to meet him when he comes down. Well, it turns out that's Kelly Markle, and he's not just an idea guy. He does a lot of things. So I was excited to meet him. So that's when Kelly and I first connected, when he came down to Whitechapel. And I loved, kind of getting to know him there. I ended up getting a job at Warner, the school connected to Whitechapel. And so it got me back into working. I had gotten a delivery job with Amazon and did that for a little while. Thought that would be great. Not so much fun. Then I get this AD job at Warner as the athletic director. And I thought, okay, that's it. Back in sports, athletic director. I always thought this is something that I want to do. Nope, that's not it. But during this time, getting to talk with Kelly, when he first came down here, we started doing some devotionals. And so we started, talking about some things, and he brought up some ideas and thoughts that, that I'd never considered, and one of which being just the idea. He talked about. I remember kind of like, he's like, like when things are bad, when things are hard, he's like, I used to like appreciate and enjoy that, and I'm like, well, like I understand having a good attitude, but you're not thankful that you got a flat tire, dude. Like you're not thankful that that this bad thing happened to you. And that's, what he's talking about. And I'm like, I'm not going to be appreciative. But like, yes, I understand you maintain a good attitude. But we talk about it, and I start to understand like what he meant by that. When you have that challenge, when you have that bad thing, it challenges and makes you strong. A lot like weightlifting. When you challenge the muscle, it hurts the muscle, but it makes it stronger when you get through. Critical thinking questions in school, they challenge your brain. They hurt. Teenagers, they're like, I hate these questions. I remember thinking the same thing. They're painful, but when you overcome them, you get stronger from going through that. So, okay, that applies to life. So I start trying to think about how that applies to my situation. And so, so it was great, to be able to get connected. And then while I'm working at Warner, there was really kind of a big, a lot of things that happened. But one thing in particular, at one point, we would have the morning get-togethers with all the teachers, and one of the teachers was talking about, hey, I was reading through Mark, and the verse said this, and I thought, like, man, I've been in church my whole life. I don't know what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John mean. Like, for how much I've spent time around the Bible, I don't know what they're about. I know that they talk about Jesus, but I don't know anything about it. So I just decided to start reading started at Matthew, made sense, read Matthew, then Mark, then Luke, then John. And really that stretch of time reading through those did a lot to kind of change my mindset on things. Basically for me, it was just a chance. It was Jesus telling us exactly how to live our lives. Like there's so many things, and I'm always thinking, I mean, obviously the world is crazy and battles over so many different things, with racism and, and just simply Christianity and, so many different, views and thoughts on it, and how most people think it's this miserable thing where you can't do anything fun. It's not fun. Like Christianity can't be fun. You can't enjoy your life. You're just following the rules. You're just doing what, Jesus and God tell you all the time. Like it's not, it's not enjoyable. It can't be enjoyable. You can't do anything fun. And so as I'm reading through those books and really it gets to the Bibles that have the black writing, unless it's what Jesus said, and then it's red, and you get into Matthew 5, and then all of a sudden Jesus starts talking, and he just talks and talks and talks through like 4 chapters, and it just goes red all the way through. And basically what he does is he just tells us this is exactly what you should be doing in your life. And so I'm reading through that, and I don't read well, so I'll read through a page, and my mind will drift, and then I'll go back and I'll read it a second and third and fourth time until I actually pay attention to the words. But going back over and over and over and through it, and I would read something, and I would be like, wait, he said something back here. And so I spent a lot of time kind of going through those, and just what I ultimately came out with was thoughts on purpose. Like, what am I doing here? So all this work and all this, basketball and my purpose and all my life, my purpose has been all about me. And what is my purpose here? And then one day I was thinking, I was like, so, like, what is purpose? Well, it always goes back to the Creator. Like, somebody makes a hammer. They made a hammer to accomplish a specific purpose, to accomplish a task. I need to pound this thing into here, so I'm going to design this to do that the best. That's its purpose. We have a Creator. We were designed for a specific purpose. Like I was given certain abilities, skills. I was not given certain abilities and skills. I was designed a certain way to fulfill a purpose. And so I started kind of thinking about that as the world is always looking for the meaning of life. What is purpose? Why are we here? And there you hear, the secular world constantly talking about that. Guys, Aaron Rodgers, if anybody pays attention to that, he's, goes into a dark room or he's taking ayahuasca, some kind of something, and it's this whole thing, his life, he's looking for a purpose. And you hear it from people, particularly celebrities, since they're out on TV all the time, and they're always looking for these within themselves things. And I'm like, man, like, they want exactly what Christianity provides. Like so many people, they want love and they want to have freedom to love. And so one thing, that I got from reading is this. Like when I talk to somebody who, from one of my jobs that, they're not from church. If I have to do an elevator pitch about Christianity, it's 2 things for me. The golden rule and John 3:16 is understanding the very basic that God sent His Son here for our salvation, and that we are supposed to go out and we're supposed to treat other people better than ourselves. Like if every single person took those 2 things very seriously, how would we have war? How would we have conflict? If every single person looked and said, hey, I'm going to put you ahead of me in traffic, which is one of my weaknesses. Julie knows. But, if in every situation, work situation, with your family, with your spouse, with everything, if we put in, even, as crazy as it gets when Jesus, because he's pretty extreme with some of the things he says, where like, hey, somebody comes in and they do something horrible. They steal something. Okay. If it's that important to you, take it. And we're like, well, obviously we're not going to blow them. I mean, that's the reality of what he pushes it to. So not that I'm inviting thieves to come into our house and take all of our stuff, but again, it's just this mindset as we go through things. And so there's so many things where like I listen to what the world says, and I'm just looking for, okay, how can I fulfill my purpose, which is to connect. He's always talking about building the kingdom. And I think we get so wrapped up, and that's another major part of it, we get so wrapped up in this world. He is constantly talking about treating other people and giving to other people, not for this world. It's all to build for the next place. And this is where I got to be careful, because the other side of it is that building the kingdom thing. He talks so much about the kingdom, the kingdom, the kingdom. That's the point and purpose of every single thing that he does. You know, he touches, and the beauty of kind of what we do here, and why I like so much about this system of using CrossFit to try to get people in, is it's exactly what Jesus did. He went and physically helped somebody, because that was his way to get into them. You know, you're blind. Here, you think that this is important. You can't see this world, so I'm gonna use that to get inside of you. And now you trust me, you believe in me, and now I'm gonna talk to you about what's really important, which is how you live your life and build your life towards the future kingdom. And so many times, you know, I just look at the way we get so consumed, and myself, you know, very much in that, where I get so consumed with this world and trying to understand, you know, it's not about this world. It's about my purpose of building for the kingdom of God. And think about, you know, I talk with my kids, with teenagers all the time about your, where you put your time. If you want to be a basketball player, where do you put your time? If you want to do this, if you want to, do that, whatever it is, where do you invest your time? That's what's important to you. And think about what God did. You know, he gives us, less than a century here to invest our time, but then we have eternity after, eternity forever and ever and ever. Which do you think is more important to him? This world, which is so brief for us, or the next, which is just going on forever? So it's things like that where I think, when the world talks about, like, man, how can God exist when so many bad things happen to people? Babies are being killed, people are abusing people, all the crazy, horrible stuff, sex trafficking, and people being murdered, mass genocide in other places, and like, God can't exist, or he's forgotten about us, he's ignoring us. No, bad things happen here. And and you hear leaders that that hey, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. He sent his son to get nailed, literally nailed to a cross. You don't think he went through horrific things? And we get so consumed with, well, it's tough, it's bad, it's so horrible here. Yeah, there's pain here. There's some really nasty things here. But he walked through. And there's Christians for centuries that have walked through. And have died and have taken on those challenges. And yeah, this body is going to get hurt and get destroyed, but it's going to serve the purpose later. Now, last thing I want to end with is kind of an example of that. There's this movie Greater, and I just like to share about this movie. It's about a football player, a kid that grew up, overweight kid, big, sloppy, kind of a kid when he's young. And this is a true story. He, grew up, I believe, in Arkansas, based off the way it goes. But he wanted to play football. And, he sees the high school coach early in the movie, and he says something about playing, and the coach tells him, well, this is what you got to do. So, he kind of does those things. And he's got an older brother. His older brother, kind of loves him, but he's pretty mean to him. And he's got this nickname, and I can't remember what the nickname was, but it's, something like Twinkie. It's something, a snack food that he would eat a lot, and so he would call him that, and it was pretty mean. Well, he ends up going on, he makes the high school team, and he does pretty well in high school, and he's like, I want to play for Arkansas. And they're like, dude, you're not playing for Arkansas. And he's like, no, like, he's obsessed. And he ends up making to a smaller college, and he's like, no, like, forget that. I don't want to play at that school. I want to play for Arkansas. So he gets him to let him, go there for a visit, and goes there for a visit, and they blow him off because they've got really good football players, and he's just big. And so they tell him, here's what you got to do. So he spends some time, and he does, and he comes in, they say, you got to be big. So he just eats everything in the world. He comes in there as a freshman, he's massive. And he only has like one semester to try to earn himself a scholarship. And they're like, everybody's making fun of him, and he is a hardcore Christian. And so between the way he lives his life and the fact that he's just kind of big and not athletic, they just kind of mock him. But over time, you tell him what to do, and you challenge him, and he would flat out go after it. At the end of the day, he ends up working himself into getting the scholarship at Arkansas, makes it onto the team, turns his teammates with the way he lives his life, his hardcore commitment to his belief system. And by the end of his college career, they end up with a great team at Arkansas. A coach who I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it was a name when I was watching the movie. I was like, holy crap, yeah, I remember that year. They were really good. And he becomes an All-American. and he gets drafted by the Indianapolis Colts in the first round of the NFL. And before he gets to play, he falls asleep on the highway driving home and he gets killed. And his brother is like just enraged, pissed off. And I'm watching, and I'm like, and he's like, it's unfair, it's unfair, it's unfair. And I'm like, all right, I'm going back to, Kelly, and it's like, all right, so like these tough things happen. And finally it kind of like settled on me. It's like, exactly, like, we don't get it. We think it's unfair that he died and he didn't get to enjoy the NFL. God doesn't care about the NFL. Like, who cares about a few $1 million? If he would have gone on and played in the NFL, he would have had a great story. Nobody would have made a movie about it. And it wouldn't have been a story that would have attached, that would have affected lives the way how unfair it is. It gets our attention that he got screwed over. He didn't get to enjoy that success here in this world because he died early and now he's gone. But what he did was he accomplished his purpose. He lived his life in a way that affected people. And I just hope that people see that movie. I would hope somehow, it's been out for a few years, but like that somehow that movie gets to people and his story gets to people and affects them so much more than if he would have lived to an old age and had a nice life. But because it was so unfair that it was taken, how great of a man, how great of a person, all the great things that he was the Lord took him early for a reason. And I can only think it's because that effect certainly had that effect on me of watching it and saying like, man, like if I had half the commitment that this guy had, what I could do. And so I'll end with that. That movie is greater. I think it's a great thing for people to watch and share. Again, and everybody gets something different out of it. But I know right now, I'm working towards whatever my purpose is, whatever my journey is. I definitely think that I'm here at CrossFit Port Orange. I'm connected to Kelly. I'm connected to Move Daytona for a reason. And I think there's some future things for me to continue trying to work towards. But I just know that each and every day, it really comes down to me continuing to make it real and just talk and have conversations. Get in the Bible as much as I can. And it's not one of those things about, studying to know all the facts and this and that. It's to develop that personal relationship and to be just real with God where I'm driving around sometimes and I'm going like, okay, like, hey, what am I doing here? What am I doing this week? What am I doing this year? What am I doing with this job? And where am I going with the next thing? And, and with this family and how I'm taking care of my boys and if I'm trying to start a business and I'm trying to start something, that can reach into our community and be an arm like Move Daytona is, like how am I doing that? Where do you want me to go with that? And so, that's where I'm at right now, still continuing to find and drive on that purpose and figure out what he has for me. But when I constantly talk to him, and when I constantly just have that, like, hey, I'm thinking about it, and I'm, and it's not getting down on my knees, all the time, hiding in some closet praying, but it's just constantly thinking, like, what do you have for me? And staying in touch with him, really more so like, somebody who's right there with me, and then like he's off there in the distance, and I'm having to, go through some magical channel to talk to God. He wants that one-on-one personal relationship, and so I'm still trying to work on developing that for myself. So, anyways, that was me. I think I'm over my time. Hopefully not too bad.
Thank you, Coach. Lots of little nuggets, man. I love the whole picture about purpose, our personal purpose. You want to know what your purpose is? Ask your maker. He made you for a specific purpose. And the cool thing is we're all different. He can use us all. If you would just close your eyes, bow your heads, and typically I give you an opportunity to make a first-time commitment to Christ, but I really feel like after hearing Kyle's story that there's probably many people in the room that kind of have a similar story to Kyle.